Today's guest is a professor of anesthesiology, a physician healer and published author. Over the past 25 years, she has impacted thousands of lives. And today she's going to share with you new insights, ideas and information to avoid burnout. Would you please help us welcome our good friend, Dr. Stephanie Byerly. Stephanie, great to see you there. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
It's really nice. Well, I've met a lot of anesthesiologists and they were a big help to me. What is the role of an anesthesiologist in the healthcare system?
So we take care of patients that are going to be having usually surgical procedures. Sometimes there are other types of procedures, but it's usually in the surgical arena. And it could be anything from elective, say plastic surgery, to any kind of emergency surgeries, neurosurgery, heart surgery, basically any kind of surgery that you need. But even if you need, say, a procedure like a colonoscopy, all those horrible things that we hate to do as adults, but those kind of things, we're there to help take care of you. Sometimes we're in dentist offices as well, if they're going to be doing extensive procedures or people, can't really tolerate having a dental procedure. So we're there to put you to sleep and wake you back up safely, and take care of you while, the surgeons do their thing.
Now that you mentioned the colonoscopy, I remember having one of those, and the team were very nice, and they even took a photo. And on the way out, they showed me a photo, and they said, Mr. Tolson, you've got a lovely little freckle in there. It's nice and cute.
Wonderful. Oh, my gosh. Well, I specialize in obstetrical anesthesia, so I take care of pregnant women. And I take care of some of the sickest pregnant women that you can imagine. So with a lot of different diseases. And so that adds a whole nother realm to being an anesthesiologist, taking care of a mom, a baby, and worrying about both of them instead of just one patient.
I could imagine there's a lot of challenges there. So to become a professor in this field, what's the journey to become a professor in this field?
So in academic medicine, so basically different than, say, if you went into a private practice. So academic medicine is basically working in a university and you're training doctors. So you're training people to go into anesthesiology, but you also have to publish papers and be on committees and basically do a lot of different things. And it's a process. So each 6 to 7 years, you jump a level. So you usually start out as an assistant professor, then you have to do more things to get promoted to an associate professor, and then even more to get promoted 6 to 7 years later to a professor. So that's the highest level that you can attain in the university situation.
My father-in-law, he's a professor in marine biology, and I've been married to my wife now I've got to get the number right, 12 or 13 years. Hopefully I get the bullseye. And over the years, I have seen his students lining up coming to his house, and he was forever having meetings and training the associate professors. And I just realised how much work went into it. I know when he was doing his studies, his mother tongue is Chinese, so being here in Taiwan, but then he wanted to translate his work into Japanese.
Oh, wow.
He went and trained himself in Japanese, how to speak and write, and then republished all of his work. Wow. And then he republished it again in English. And I admire him because I love to study, but that level of detail that's required is quite phenomenal. So what are the challenges, as you start to train other doctors and you're doing the role as the professor, what are the challenges that you face along the way, and what were some of those conflicts that you had to resolve through your journey?
Well, you go to school for 8 years prior to choosing what type of medical specialty that you go into. And in the United States, we do 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and then whatever specialty you pick. So that for me, it was 5 extra years of training. And then you start on this journey of what you're going to do when you're done. And besides the work of when do you do all this extra work that you have to do? I mean, it's a lot of it is on your own time. You're working very busily taking care of patients, but you also have a life outside of the hospital. And so this creates just a lot of challenges for physicians, especially women physicians. And it's been quite a journey. I will say I had some episodes of burnout along the way that I was very fortunate to get myself out of. But it's very common nowadays for doctors to have burnout, and not just doctors, a lot of individuals in healthcare, but specifically physicians, because it's so much responsibility.
In my preparation for our conversation together, I understand that the burnout rate is huge. It's
Yeah.
between 42 to 47% of physicians actually experiencing the symptoms of burnout right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And I understand that as people go through the system of education, it's very much focused on our IQ and our intelligence. And
Hmm.
there's not a lot there to develop the emotional intelligence. So a lot of people may not even understand that they're burned out. They may not even understand that they're experiencing these symptoms of burnout.
Yes.
So for you, what did you see in yourself? And then what are you seeing in others as these symptoms of burnout?
So usually what happens is that physicians start to, when they're at work, they're just overwhelmed. And all of this has really gotten amplified since COVID, but because it was pretty significant prior to that, but has just worsened. And so overwhelmed, just too much to do. You start to get short with people. You start to feel like you're walking around and nothing matters, like nothing you're doing is important. And why am I working this hard? And you start to feel emotionally exhausted, and like the littlest thing might just push you sort of over the edge to be reactive when normally you wouldn't be that way. And you just also feel like a lack of personal fulfillment, that you're not happy in your job. And you can imagine the stakes are high when you're dealing with people's lives, and there's just so much pressure from the medical system, which is very broken. It's very, well known and talked about that the medical system in the United States is just broken. And they are physicians, other healthcare workers have sort of become just a cog in the wheel in many instances. And so, we're being sort of sucked up in the big business of what medicine has become. And so you can imagine when you've dedicated your life to medicine, that you sort of sometimes feel betrayed by the system.
Mm.
And if you don't have someone to help you, or different mechanisms for your own self-care, self-compassion, it can really be a very devastating thing. And people are leaving medicine in droves, especially women, which is very scary.
I remember I was having a knee surgery in 1998 and then another one in 1999. And the anesthesiologist came in and he had this great personality.
Mm.
He started to talk to me. Obviously, he's checking my signs and symptoms. He's checking off his checklist. And then all of a sudden, he says, "Well, you're good to go."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, when are you going to put the needle in?" He goes, "It's in already."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was totally blown away. I didn't feel a thing. And that bedside manner, he was calm, he was
Mhm.
relaxed. I went into the operating theatre. Dr. Michael Walsh came in, said, "Hello, Daniel," introduced me. And then the anesthesiologist said, "I want you to count back from 100 down to 1." And I thought, okay. And my arm started to go cold and I got to about 97 and I went, ugh.
Yes.
And then I don't know how long it was. I can only assume it was hours later. I had this lovely voice of God next to me. "Daniel, wake
Yeah.
up, Daniel." And I woke up and then I went, and
I'm
I was
the
in
same.
pain. And he just smiled and took me out of
Yeah.
pain. I thought, wow, I think maybe that was God. And it was a great experience. But then I've been into the emergency room at other times, and the hospital is like it's like a scene out of one of these Hollywood movies. Like there's been a pandemic, but there hasn't been. But there's just bloodied people, missing arms, missing legs, and they're running around. And they come over, the anaesthesiologist, and they're going to gear you up, but the needle just goes in. And I think to myself, where's that bedside manner? But as a patient, I'm not really caring about anybody else. I don't care who the person you spoke to before. I don't care about the person next to you.
Yeah.
I want the attention. I want to be greedy. Come and fix me. I'm in pain. My pain's 10 times worse
Yeah.
than his. And
Absolutely.
and I could imagine just the pressure to perform in and the long hours
Hmm.
and to try to have that empathy as we go through.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what happens is physicians lose their empathy because they just they're to their wits' end, and it's just the pressure really is so much because of what is being asked of them. You know, they tell physicians, "Oh, just become more resilient and meditate, and you'll be fine." But we actually probably are some of the most resilient people on this planet, and so that is not really, it's the answer, but the medical system is being worked on. It's again broken, going to take a long time to fix. So there are ways though for physicians as individuals to get some control of all of this so that they handle all of it better. And as I said, there's lots of physicians leaving medicine, but there's ways that they could actually look at it differently and then make a decision from a very empowered place if they want to leave medicine versus just thinking, okay, let me go get another job and it'll be better, because it just doesn't work that way.
No, well, the old saying is wherever we go, there we are, and all of
Mhm.
that emotional baggage, we can take it from relationship to relationship, we can take it from patient to patient, we can take it from hospital to hospital.
Mm.
So just changing the physical location doesn't solve the emotional challenges.
Right,
You know,
and yes, and it's this everywhere you go, there's gonna be big problems, and so, again, the pressures on physicians are just it's just getting to be more and more.
it piles on. Medscape did a report and they
Mm.
surveyed 13,069 physicians,
Yeah.
and they surveyed them from 29 different specialties in 2021. And they talked about the most burned out physicians. So, number one, emergency medicine,
Mhm. Yep.
followed by critical care, obstetricians and gynecologists, infectious diseases, and family medicine. They were the top five. But what came in very close was physical medicine and rehabilitation, diabetes, radiology, podiatries, and pulmonary medicine.
Mhm.
So they were the top 10. Now, I know that's quite global, but I'd like to focus specifically on the challenges that female
Mhm.
doctors, female physicians have when it comes to burnout. What are the unique problems that they're facing?
So women physicians are more burned out than male physicians, and there's a lot of reasons. There are a lot of objective things that women physicians face that male physicians do not. Now, I'm not going to say that no male physician will ever be sexually harassed, but sexual harassment for female physicians is alive and well. And also, there is gender discrimination in ways with pay cut, basically pay discrimination. I just was on a paper that was published recently that if you look at anesthesiologists between a man and a woman, and if they have the same exact credentials, they work the same amount of hours, the same years of experience, the average female anesthesiologist makes 38,000 a year less than a man. So you can imagine, and that's just, that's universal across all specialties. So you can imagine that there's several $1 million of income lost, and
Mm.
there's no objective reason. It's gender bias, and we get papers published less than male physicians. We get less leadership roles in societies like, say, the American Medical Association, just as an example. Like the bigger societies, there's barely any women in charge as the chairman of clinical departments across the country in all specialties. There's not very many women deans. They mostly get assistant dean or associate dean positions. And so the list, goes on and on of the objective things. But the things that happen also that just sort of eat away at you are when you get called a nurse all the time, or you get called by your first name, and you get asked to, get the Christmas gifts this year, or make the brownies, or, do things that male physicians would never ever be asked to do, because it would be expected that they would say no, but they wouldn't be looked at differently. Women are judged very differently. They're judged very harshly. And mostly it's unconscious gender bias. People really aren't doing it on purpose, but it's just the
Mm.
way we've been raised and the way we've been socialized to believe what women are supposed to be doing. And other women do it to other women as well. And so it's pretty pervasive. So women physicians, we also have all of these things piled on top of us, along with being a physician, where there's all of the challenges that we face for that.
Mm. As you're saying that, I'm just reflecting on my life and watching the television shows that I've watched over the years. I remember watching an American show called MASH, and it was about the
Yes.
doctors and the nurses out in the war. And in my mind, all doctors were male and the nurses were female. That's just kind of how I position that. When I watch other medical shows like Doogie Howser MD, the star of the show is male and the nurses are female. And when I go to the doctors, I don't choose, but I tend to see a male doctor and a female nurse. So that bias, I can think about it. It's in this DNA of mine that doctors are male, nurses are female.
It's ingrained.
And I even remember my brother, he wanted to become a nurse. And people were like, a male nurse?
Yeah.
I can't mention it, but the words they used to say, they'd say, are you this, are you this, are you this? And he'd be like, why do I have to be that or that to be a male nurse? His father-in-law was a male nurse.
Yeah.
But I can imagine in a lot of people's mind it's very difficult to process if they've had that conditioning over the years. So what are you doing now to help these women physicians? Because it's obviously a mountain that they can't climb over themselves. It's a bias that they can't face themselves. What are you doing to help them avoid that burnout and to get what they're entitled to or get what they're worth?
So I'm the chair of a very large committee for women anesthesiologists in the United States, and we're doing a lot of work on changes in scheduling and we don't just say, focus just on women, but we bring these problems to light because of women, about different types of scheduling, different ways of looking at how you get promoted, different ways of looking at mental health, and this is in general for everybody, but women do have a much higher suicide rate as far as physicians. I don't know if you know this, but 400 physicians a year kill themselves, and that's very underreported. And male physicians have about a 75% higher suicide rate than males in the general population, but women physicians have over 200% higher suicide rate than women in the general population. And so we're trying to work on promoting mental health for all physicians, because what happens is that it's shunned upon for us to get treatment, and people are afraid because of licensure, their license may be affected, or their credentialing at a hospital, so they don't seek care, and because they're afraid of the consequences, or if somebody found out they were on an antidepressant or things like this. So oftentimes physicians have a very high rate of substance abuse, which is very scary. So I'm on these committees working on a lot of these different things for women, pay equity, but as well, and I've published a lot of papers on it, but as well, I've become a life coach for women physicians, and that is my biggest joy, and being able to help women really just find their voice and find their power and really get joy back in their personal and professional lives, because the women that I coach come to me and they're drowning and they're miserable and they just don't want to do it another day. And so through coaching and the things that I teach them, and I also get them involved in other types of things, resilience things like meditation, self-care, morning rituals, all the things that we do, it's just transformational for them.
It's interesting. Who's caring for the carer? I know this as a coach. I carry my own challenges, but my job is to be that pillar of strength for my clients.
Yeah.
And I'm not there to divulge my challenges, but I'm lucky that I have a coach, and so I've got somebody to talk to. I remember when I was in one of my first careers, I could see my boss going through burnout. He was doing his best to coach and lead me, and I asked him one day, I said, "Are you okay? Who's coaching and leading you?" And he said, "I don't need a coach." And I thought to myself, God, if anybody needed a coach, it was him. And eventually it led to burnout for him. And he was really out for, a good couple of years. He could not perform and his business suffered. But I could imagine the challenges, because I know that when I sit in front of a doctor, I am ignorant. I don't know the questions to ask. I don't know what's happening in my body. What's happening inside is invisible. And I think a lot of people substitute doctor for God at that stage. Here's my life. You fix me. You make me good. And I think that's a big burden to carry. The other thing that I've heard is that older people, when they want an audience, they call a doctor. And they go and see the doctor and they have that down dump. They dump all the emotional baggage on the doctor. And the doctor has to carry that. And I think when I was looking before, doctors are working at least 40 hours a week. But some of these general practitioners, I know in Australia, they might be seeing 40, 50, 60 patients per day.
Oh, yes. I have clients who tell me that their nurse will knock on the door after 10 minutes and say it's time to move on to the next patient and that it's undoable. And women physicians, there have been studies, the U.S. News and World Report a couple of years ago published that women physicians have a less mortality rate for patients that have congestive heart failure. But what that leads to is those women physicians, they get more needy clients, like what you're talking about, who go to them. So more hours during the day in the office, more preventative care for these patients. But what that leads to is more hours of filling out the electronic medical record when they go home. So they go home and have hours and hours and hours of work to do. And now that we have technology, you can't get away from it. So emails, the electronic medical record, it's all on your phone. And so you're expected to be answering these things 24/7. And so it's a huge burden.
I know when my clients find me, they often wake up in the morning and they say, I feel stuck and I don't know what to do next. For these women physicians, what's the first problem that they would become aware of so they know it's time to reach out to you?
They literally will say, I am drowning. I have to figure this out. I really want to leave medicine. My life is falling apart, because obviously it starts to impact their personal life as well. And they just can't think about doing this for another 20, 30 years. And especially, I have a lot of women of color. And I will just say that women of color, everything we've talked about, it's just very much more pronounced for them. And so to be able to help them and explain all of these real biases and the way that women are socialized, the way we grow up, the way we're told the most important things is the way we look, the way we talk, the way we act. We should stay small. We shouldn't be too this or too that. We have sort of that on top of it. And women of color, again, it's just more amplified. So for them to start to realize that this stuff is all real, because we, as physicians, we think we're afraid to share, like, this is only happening to me and I'll be weak if I tell somebody about this. But when they find out that they're just joining a whole group of people who are struggling with the same kinds of challenges, it's life-changing for them. And then to realize they're already enough, because they come thinking they're broken. And a lot of it comes down to, too, we get down to their traumas. You know, we've all had trauma, and I specialize in trauma because of the traumas I've suffered myself through my life. I'm a trauma survivor. And we just get to what's really causing all of this, and how do we look at your thoughts differently, and how does your life just change? And it just transforms.
Such an inspirational story. I love to hear this, because we go through these traumas, we repress them, we put them over there somewhere. And I've worked with people in the police force and the armed forces, and the good advice they get is just park it over there and deal with it later on. But then the psychosomatic illness kicks in, and you start to get all these illnesses and disease, and you're trying to think, well, where's this coming from? Well, it's these traumas that are piling up over here that are creating those inner conflicts.
Yes.
And if we don't deal with those, then we're going to carry them around. And I once heard a psychologist say it takes 50 years to get over the first 5 years of our life. And I think a lot of us coming into our 40s and 50s, we ain't got 50 years.
Right.
We ain't got 50 years to wait.
You know, I don't know if you've ever heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. But it's really about what happens to you, because trauma lives in your body. And so often we have these responses with our body, our hearts racing, you know, this fight or flight response that we live in all the time, is we don't understand why. But a lot of that comes from past traumas that have never been processed. And so I think a lot of people that go into medicine have had a lot of trauma in their life. And so they go into medicine to try to take care of people because they were not taken care of or nurtured. And so there's something called the ACEs score. Have you ever heard of that? The Adult Childhood Adverse Events. And the more of these you have, the higher chance you have of going into the medical field.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
I remember growing up with learning disabilities. I had linear sequential learning disability.
Mm.
I had twisted spine. My bronchial tubes had collapsed. I had all the allergies. I had asthma. My cranial plates were pushing down on the left and right hemisphere of the brain. I
Oh.
was in migraine headaches. My nose used to bleed, and I was just a walking mess.
Mm.
And I remember having these visions when I was younger. I saw myself as a doctor. Now, I'm not saying a doctor, but like a doctor. And I could see myself helping people. And I remember the amount of people that it took to put me back into decent shape.
Mhm.
And I always felt that I had received a lot of help and I wanted to return that. I couldn't see myself giving people injections. I couldn't see myself giving them pills or cutting them open. But I saw myself helping them. And through later on in life, I found coaching and I went, that's how I'm going to
Yeah.
help people.
Yeah.
But the journey started for me was 2008 when I realized I had to deal with my own stuff first.
Yeah.
I had to deal with my stuff and that was
Yeah.
a big turning point. But once I had done that, then my cup was full and I could start to pour from that full cup and it was overflowing. But I understand why a lot of people get into the field of coaching, but also medicine, now that you mentioned that ACEs score.
Yes,
Makes a lot of sense.
yes, it really does. But yes, you have to deal with your own things to be able to really be able to help other people in different ways. And that's why I love coaching because as an anesthesiologist, I touch a person once when I take care of them, and I'll never see them again. But I did take care of them at a critical time in their life. But with coaching, and you literally when you teach some people the techniques or the way how they can have their life to be, it's life changing forever, and so that I just really it's amazing to see the transformations.
It is. So tell us more about your website and how people can get in contact with you through your website.
Thank you. So my business name is Physician Healer. Although I don't just work with physicians, I work with women who are professionals. I work with men as well. But if you go to my website, you can download, excuse me, my newsletter, my 5-day journal, which will pop up a little video, and you'll get a journal about how to start dealing with burnout. And at the top, there's also a link to schedule a call if you'd like to talk about coaching and see how we could work together. And I'm really branching out into as well the trauma piece and leadership. I've held a lot of leadership roles, and I really want to help more women get into leadership roles because we need them. We know that they change culture and they fix companies and the things that they do. So got to keep the women everywhere.
Got to keep them. They're important. They're
Yeah.
important. I know my my wife says everybody wants a piece of her. I want a piece of my wife. My children want a piece of my wife. My cat, my dog want a piece of my wife. And my wife's the most important person in the house. And we've got to keep these ladies in good shape. Got to keep them
Yes.
healthy, both physically and emotionally.
Yes, absolutely. So
So let's do it, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to head over to Dr. Stephanie's website, physicianhealer.com. The link will be in the show notes, and even schedule in a discovery call.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I had my first coach, it really changed my life. And the first thing that I learned was I was actually a person of value. I wasn't worthless. I had a lot of worth. I just had to learn how to get it out and to articulate it.
yes.
So if you're a physician or if you're lost at the moment and you want to get clarity on your life and where you want to go, if you want to overcome those past traumas, reach out to Dr. Stephanie today. Dr. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure to be here with you to learn about what you're doing. And ladies and gentlemen, remember, one new idea at the right time is enough to change your life. So go to physicianhealer.com and we'll see you soon. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.